Guys, okay, today we have one of my favorite bedtime stories. Okay, so this story is about a man. He lived a few hundred years ago. It's actually a true story. And so basically, he was a student and he had traveled to a new city in search of some new knowledge or career or some sort of job. So at that time, he was still a student, and if you're a student, you probably can relate to this. Life was kind of difficult to him. He didn't really have a lot of money, to the point where he was really, really poor. Like, he was in poverty and he didn't even have much food to eat. He was very hungry. So one day in the new city, he tried to go out and look for some sort of something, work, something he can learn, or just basically hunger drove him out to kind of go look for something to eat. And he was a conscious type of guy. Like, he had faith, and he lived by this principle that he'd say, he who puts his trust in God, God is sufficient for him. That's what he lived by. So when he was walking down that street that day, he came across this tiny a little pouch on the street. And he didn't see anybody around. The owner, like somebody who might have dropped it, he could have, ran after them or anything. He didn't really see anybody. So he picked it up and he took it home. And then when he got home, he opened it, and inside the pouch, he had never seen such a beautiful pearl necklace in his life before. It looked very expensive, and it's just something so dazzling and just mesmerizing. And obviously, if you are kind of in his shoes, his luck has like totally changed now. He basically found something like, a lottery essentially. And then, but obviously he because he kind of had that like consciousness, it didn't sit well with him. Like, maybe, what if somebody's looking for this? Like, it's just something that, wow, he just, got out of nowhere. So he went out again and maybe try to find the owner or something like that. So, like, obviously back in the day, many hundreds of years ago, there's no mass communication that people just put on blast, like, oh, hey, I lost something, did anybody find it? So basically he just walked around until finally he heard this old man, like very old man, kind of at their town square, or just like some place where it's like a marketplace or somewhere busy. He heard this older gentleman calling out, saying that, hey, did anybody find a pouch that looks like this? I lost it. If somebody could come return it, I will have a reward of 500 dinars, which is kind of like gold coins back in that day. So 500 gold coins for the one who found it. And 500, that's a lot of money. But compared to what this necklace was worth, it was not a lot, right? So you can imagine how how expensive this necklace was to begin with. So then, obviously, when he heard this man, he approached him, because he was, I guess, a good guy. He approached him and he asked, he invited him back. Obviously, I guess he didn't bring his necklace around with him. He invited him back to his home, and he asked the way, to make sure that this is the guy who actually owns this pouch. He invited him in and he asked him, describe the pouch to me. And then the old man describes it perfectly correctly. And then he asks, okay, tell me what's inside this pouch. And then the old man, says it again correctly. It's a pearl necklace. It looks like this. This is the design, etc. And then he asks, like, okay, describe, maybe the string of the pouch or something like that, just to make sure, like, this is actually the owner of this property. So after he said it all correctly, this young man, he brings the pouch back to him and gives it to him. And so at that point, the older gentleman, he wanted to give him the 500 gold coins, right? As a reward. And so this young man, obviously, he's just, again, person of conscience, had this principle, and I guess like a person of faith. So he didn't feel good about just taking the money. It didn't. Ultimately, that necklace belonged to that old man. It's not. He felt he shouldn't be rewarded for something that belongs to him, and he just got back in return. So he declined the money. And then the old man said, listen, I'm giving it out of my own oath and promise to the recipient, you should take it. And he's like, no, I can't take it. It's your money. So then, the older gentleman then, thanked him, I guess, and departed. And then some time passed, right? And then he got poorer and poorer, and he just ran out of all resources that he had. And at this point, he's, if you don't find a job, you don't find what you're looking for, you kind of get up and move to the next place, wherever that is, right, in search of something. So he set out to a new land on a ship. The ship was departing his city, and he thought maybe on a new land he'd find new provision, maybe something, new opportunities. So while on that ship, the new problem he had was that basically the ship, there was a storm that was taking place, and the ship got caught, it got wrecked and basically shattered. And somehow he held onto a piece of wood and basically rode the waves. And at this point, he, again, is thinking to himself, he who puts his trust in God, God is sufficient for him. So then he's like, all right, some time later, he washes to shore onto a small island or a small town. And he kind of, makes his way, and he sees a building, and looks like it was a place of worship. So he goes inside and basically sits there after this long, arduous journey. It was an empty building. There's nobody there, so he just kind of, to himself, finally a resting place. He started to, I guess, maybe do his prayers or something like that he had a melodious voice. So I think somebody heard him, and they noticed that this was a new man on this island or this new town. It was a very small community in that place. So some people approached him, and they all gathered around him and asked, who he was, what is his story, and what happened to him, and, he looks disheveled and stuff like that. So basically he told them all the story of what happened to him and kind of how he got to where he was. Like, he was a student, he's trying to learn in search of new knowledge, boarded the ship, and then basically this is how he ended up here. So they asked, okay, would you like to stay and lead the prayer for a bit? Because, they really liked the way that he was reciting the prayers. So then at this point, he was obviously in a dire situation. He didn't have basically nothing at this point. And so he obliged, and they gave him some form of payment for his services. So he's like, all right, this is a good gig for the time being, basically. And then he found like some books in that place. So he started reading some of the books that he found. And then when someone saw him, they were shocked. They're like, oh my God, you can read? And they were so elated. I guess it sounds like a community that, like, maybe at some point there were people who were learned, but over time they lost their educators over the generations, or maybe they never really had someone who was literate in their community. And so when they saw this man being able to read, it was just shocking and just so impressive. So they wanted their kids to be educated. So they asked, would you please, like, teach our kids to read? And then they compensated him for his teaching and stuff like that. So then and then another day, a few days passed. Another day he saw some paper in this building, and then he started writing in his journey, in his like diary or journal or something. And then someone noticed, and they're like, oh my God, wow, you could also write, I mean, I guess they didn't realize if somebody could read, maybe they could also write. It was just a very, I guess, a not literate community. So they were just thrilled. So they obviously wanted this person who has all these skills that could help their community develop. So they wanted to keep him there. So they gave him gifts and like wealth and, like, just making sure that he's happy and he's getting what he wants from this community. And so he needs to stay. But then they feared that sooner or later he would want to be on his way, maybe go to his family, or try to find the thing that he was searching for, or just get on his way to wherever he was coming from. So they start to scheme, like, okay, how do we get him to stay here? And so there was it was a small community. Everybody kind of like knew each other, and just more like a tribal communal type of place. So they had an orphan girl in their community who was not married. So they were like, oh my gosh, we could just tie him here by getting her married to him, and he could build a family here, and then who'd want to leave their kids and go on, right? So that was their way of kind of keeping him in that community. So at first he wasn't sure, and he's just, I guess he wasn't thinking about marriage whatsoever at that point. But I guess like he did have other plans for whatever he was searching for. But after some thought and convincing, maybe I guess he didn't know what he was searching for at that point, or for whatever reason, he basically decided, okay, fine, I think this marriage sounds good. Maybe I'll stay here. And also, it sounds like he was like kind of like a lonesome soul, like a lonesome student. He was kind of searching for something. It didn't sound like he had a family to get back to anywhere. But I don't know if that part of the story clearly, so somebody can look that up. But anyway, so he thought, okay, this sounds like a good offer. And then again, remember, he lived by that rule: he who puts his trust in God, God is sufficient for him. And so far he was well taken care of. Like, he's no longer in poverty, he had food to eat, so he stayed. And then he got married to this girl, and then on their wedding night he approached her, and his gaze fixated on her neck. And he wasn't even looking at her face. And he saw that same necklace on her neck. Obviously, this girl was like offended. He doesn't even want to look at my face and admire my beauty. He's so materialistic. He just wants to look at my possessions. She's thinking like something else, and she's pissed. She, again, small community. So she told the people, like, what kind of man is this y'all recommended me to, basically. And so they all gather around, and then, I guess they all like do decisions or discussions together, or solve disputes in a communal way. So they were like, hey man, you broke our heart. Like, what's up? And he's just like, no, please, don't misunderstand me. I've seen this necklace before. That's why I'm shocked. And so, he told them about the story. Like, this older gentleman had lost it, and, and I returned it to him, and then I didn't see him after that, basically, right? And then so they all were all startled and in disbelief and shock, and started saying in loud voices and in wonder, like, oh my Lord, God is great, God is great. And he's a little bit confused at this point, like, okay, why are they reacting this way, right? And then they told him of this old man, right? That this old man is actually from here, from this small community, this island, and that he had passed away a little while ago. But then they would hear him in this, around the town, or just when he was supplicating to his God, he would raise his hands and ask God, oh God, oh my God, I have not seen a more decent man like this man, marry him to my daughter. That's what he would ask. Like, people would, hear him asking this prayer, basically. And then here he was. This man ended up getting married to his daughter. The interesting thing was that this old man, he was ultra wealthy, like extremely wealthy. I mean, if he was walking around with such an expensive necklace, which I guess he brought for his daughter on a trip, I mean, imagine how much more he had back home, right? So this young man, he married rich without even knowing it. And so I guess at that point he realized, like this life principle that he's trying to live by, because of his trust in God, in doing the right thing. Not only did he get out of poverty and into extreme wealth, but he also found a home, a respectful community, and a loving family, basically something that he didn't have before, at the start of the story. So actually, this man, it's a true story. So this man went on to achieve great things. He became an infamous judge or jurist. He became renowned for his knowledge and justice, and people basically loved him. His name was Muhammad ibn al-Abdul Bakir, and I'll link down some of the details below if you guys want to look into it a little bit further. So this was the story of the man who put his trust in his God and God was indeed sufficient for him. So it's a nice story. I hope you enjoyed it. And guys, tell me what your favorite part of the story was, or what lessons you drew from it. And if you have any suggestions for other stories that you really love and you want to hear them on this channel, then send it to me. I would love to read them. And you should probably go to sleep now if you're up late. If you're having trouble sleeping, I also made these really interesting go to sleep videos where you hear audio about random noises. So check them out too.